What's the craziest crime you or somebody in your family has committed? My aunt had a boyfriend, let's call him Mike, cause that was his name. He was always the life of the party, everyone loved him. Always holding my aunt from behind and kissing her neck. A little too much PDA, but hey, they were happy. Turns out Mike was abusive. Like, very abusive. Physically and mentally. The neck kissing was him whispering in her ear, berating my aunt for making a fool of herself dancing. My grandfather found out about the abuse. Went over to Mike's place, knocked on the door. When Mike answered, my grandfather put a gun to his head and said, if I find out you ever touch my daughter I'll kill you. Welp, a few weeks later my aunt shows up with a black eye and a sling. Mike. He was found dead on the roof of his apartment building the following weekend. We all have zero doubt it was my grandfather's doing. As a successful lawyer I am sure he had connections who could help. My dad's cousin erased all family member names from a property deed except for his father's. The paperwork had been water damaged, so there was no easy way to tell what should have been there. Family law says that he also paid off some local politicians' office workers to make the new deed stand. My grandfather's father was a mean, abusive, hateful drunk who would come home from working in the mines long enough to terrorize his children and impregnate his wife and then leave again for mine work. He tried to set the house on fire, with wife and kids, 13 of them, inside, twice. One day my grandfather and a couple of his siblings were picking berries across the road from the house and his drunk father started taking potshots at them with a rifle. My grandpa, one brother, and his oldest sister took off running for the house with the agreement that the first one there would kill him, their father. My grandpa's sister got there first and shot him to death. She was never charged with a crime, due to her age and the fact that everyone knew my great-grandfather was a mean son of a bitch and had it coming. Eater. Wow, my most upvoted comment is about my family's messed up history. A distant cousin got a terminally ill father to give her power of attorney and then stole all of his money so she wouldn't have to split it with her brother. Edit. Don't worry, she did go to jail as her rush to clean him out involved a lot of fraud and forgery. Edit. Man, it is slightly depressing how many of you have similar stories. What's up with people? Legend about some great uncles of mine stealing their dad's corpse from the funeral home. They went out to the woods with it and got drunk, then returned the body the next morning. Edited to add, so I talked to my mom and I missed or misremembered some wonderful details. They broke into the funeral home by backing dad's work truck through a wall. Dad was a professional burglar who would have appreciated the irony of a thief's corpse being stolen, thought it was hilarious, and been proud his sons pulled the stunt off. They played a game of poker with dad's body. And at some point they got caught because they attended the funeral the next day in handcuffs. My mom said that the father was apparently the one person in our family who never drank, so they weren't going out to get drunk with dad one last time. The sons likely had a beer though. My mother-in-law and her ROTC friends once stole an actual tank from a military base way back in the 60s 70s. They were there on a field trip and they were finally stopped when they ran out of gas while driving it down the highway. According to my grandmother-in-law, she saw the whole thing going down on the news before she got the call and realized her kid was one of those joyriders. There's a video of it floating around on the internet somewhere. My grandfather's cousin stabbed a waiter to death because he wouldn't let him use the employees only restroom in his restaurant. Is your grandfather's cousin Jack Henry Abbott? Not sure if it should be considered a crime, but one of my great aunts was in an abusive marriage with a war vet who took to beating her and forcing her to play Russian roulette when he drank. One night she managed to rig the gun so when he took his turn he blew his brains out. She wasn't charged. I worked at a movie theater when Back to the Future was originally released. We used to take the entire movie ticket instead of tearing them and resell them to the next group coming in. The old theater was massive. Sat 600 people. We probably made about $15,000 between the two of us in a month or so. Adjusted for inflation, it's about $37,000. We were the richest high school kids in our town. My husband's dad killed the guy who his then girlfriend was cheating on him with. He was supposed to serve a life term but got out because of a clerical error. He did manual labor on a local park and apparently the guys who helped were supposed to get a reduced sentence. However, he was not supposed to. I think my husband talked about it once. Also, my husband's half-brother, same murderous dad, killed his business partner. He would have gotten away with it, however. He moved the body when he found out construction was going to start in that spot. And what were they going to build there? A prison. He's currently serving a life sentence. My husband has never met his half-brother. He also has two half-sisters from the same dad who are law-abiding citizens. Two half-sisters that didn't get caught. My mom's father was a Vietnam vet. He married my grandma he met while in Germany, adopted her oldest son, and they had 3 daughters. He physically, emotionally, and sexually abused all of them. When they were toddlers, he'd wake them up at 5 AM for PT, like basic training for adults. When they walked into a room he was in, he'd throw knives at them to check their reflexes. When my aunt graduated high school, she moved out and he lost his mind. He kept trying to convince her to move back in, and actually convinced her to come home to talk about it. That day she was sitting on the couch and told him she would never come back. So, he pulled a gun, shot her 3 times, once in the hand as she was trying to block her heart, once in the stomach as she stood up, and once in the bum as she turned to run. Then he walked to his back bedroom and shot himself twice, once in the heart and once in the head. I wasn't alive, but I read the newspaper article and it was horrible. Side note, my family is really messed up because my grandma would take us grandkids to his gravesite and tell us what a great man he was. Edit. My aunt survived. Sorry y'all. My dad told me he once snuck into a tire warehouse. He cut the alarm and came in through a window on the roof and stole a bunch of tires. Does he have any leftover tires? I'm looking for some 235/65 R18s. I guess. After that, he retired from his life of crime. When I was a young teen, the boys from the neighborhood and I loved playing pinball and video games at our local bowling alley. Problem was we didn't have enough money to enjoy our new addiction. We decided to do something about that little problem. We started with a very rudimentary system. We actually scotch taped a piece of thread to a quarter and were able to fish it up and down a couple times before the string would break or the tape would give out. This worked fairly well, but we wanted and needed more. Our next plan was a little more professional. We somehow concocted a scheme to make quarters. A few lessons in science class had actually stuck, and we realized that we needed something to fool the coin mechanism in the pinball machine into thinking that whatever it was we made our quarters with was an actual quarter. We ended up deciding that lead would be our material of choice. We used lead for a couple of reasons. A couple of the guy's father was an avid hunter. He even reloaded his own shotgun shells. Because of this he had a burner set up in his shop to melt down lead. Another reason is that lead is not magnetic. Science. We made a mold out of plaster and used the burner to melt lead to make our quarters. But where to get more lead? One of us came up with the brilliant thought that tire weights were made of lead. Carrying screwdrivers and pliers we scoured the parking lots of shopping centers. We would wander through and drop down out of sight between cars. Using the tools we had brought we would manage to get the tire weights off with little trouble. We were in business. Our production line was soon up and running. We would melt lead, pour it into our mold, cool it and then move on to finishing our new quarter. The finishing process was crude, but effective. We would snip off the burr where the lead was poured. We would then file down the edge, making sure it stayed mostly round. Using steel wool and a polishing cloth we would then shine the quarters. Now came the trial run. We went to the bowling alley with a few quarters to see if our harebrained scheme would actually work. In they went, and the pinball machine lit up and was ready to be played. Success. We intensified our production and soon we had bunches of quarters. We were thrilled. We could play video games anytime we wanted. Every day after school you'd find us at the bowling alley, happily playing our games. But our downfall was soon to come. We never thought of the fact that someone might notice a bunch of fake quarters being used in their video games and pinball machines. It literally never crossed our early teenage minds. We just knew we were having a blast. One fateful day we went to the bowling alley as usual. We started playing games and soon some men approached us. They started questioning us and accusing us. We were scared to death. One of the guys yelled run, and we took off as fast as we could. We made it to the doors and down the steps we went. We all lived on the same cul-de-sac and that's the direction we headed. Running as fast as we could, we briefly split up. The men that were chasing us only followed one of us kids. He made the colossal mistake of running straight to his house and through the front door. From there our crime spree ended. A few days later I was in class when I was called to the office. When I got there my father was sitting with a man I'd never seen before. He was wearing a black suit with a black tie. I had to go before the principal, my father and a member of the United States Secret Service. Although they take the counterfeiting of US currency very seriously, they understood that it was just a bunch of knucklehead kids making quarters to play video games. He actually told me that he was impressed with the quality of the quarters. He also said that they had recovered over $75 in fake quarters. We had made, and used, over 300 quarters. We had to make restitution for the money and the charge was placed on our juvenile records. It was explained to us that if we kept our noses clean the charge would be expunged. Luckily for me I learned my lesson and stayed on the straight and narrow for the rest of my young adult life. And that, fellow redditors, is how I was charged with counterfeiting US currency. If that doesn't define the meaning of a crazy crime, I don't know what would. Cousin got busted robbing a bank. Got sentenced to jail. Proceeded to break out of jail with his cellmate and went on the run. Fast forward a few months and he's living in a hotel room with his cellmate. Cellmate orders a pizza to the room. Bad idea. Delivery guy recognized them and reported them to the police. They get arrested again and shortly after my cousin killed himself in prison. My cousin had a wife and a kid and got into a nasty coke habit. We don't bring him up anymore. My dad's side of the family grew up as New Hampshire hicks. My grandfather was stabbed into different bar fights and burned down an entire country club because he thought they were too stuck up. He was never caught and went on to earn a bronze and silver star in the Korean War, but unfortunately lost his leg too. Edit. Since this is getting some attention I thought I might add that my grandfather got his stuff together, started a successful small business and as a funny twist later joined that same country club as an old man. He never really felt welcome there my dad said though, they weren't really his kind of people. It's not a bad crime or anything, but it was illegal at the time. So, in Germany, up until a few years ago, we still had a general draft for the army. And a generation ago it was very hard to get out of it. My uncle was a hardcore pacifist, so going to the army wasn't an option for him. But being accepted as a conscientious objector at that time basically required you to be a devout Christian and use the Bible as an argument for why you couldn't kill another human. And my uncle was also atheist. He couldn't realistically object, didn't want to go to the army and didn't want to go to jail, too. So he waited. He got sent his draft notice. Passed the physical and got a letter telling him to report to X company under Sergeant Y. He wrote back a reply, on rose-colored paper, scented with perfume, about how much he was looking forward to serving under the strong leadership of Y, promising to obey every one of his orders, and that he can't wait to experience life in the barracks together with so many strong and muscular men. He was declared unfit for service shortly after. My uncle was a small drug lord in Northern California in the 90s. He had a compound out in Gold Country, had to drive through 3 gates with guards to get to his house. I never questioned it as a kid, just enjoyed heading up so I could fish in the stocked base pond, which also had snapping turtles, as a line of defense. He'd take me out shopping at the mall with a film canister full of coke that he'd take hits off of occasionally, shadowed by some bodyguards. One time we were out for a ride in his Corvette going well over 100 and got tagged by highway patrol. He talked his way out of a ticket, told the officer he was showing off for his nephew and got carried away. The officer thought it was hilarious and told me it was lucky since he had a ton of illegal guns and drugs in the trunk and would have made a run for it. He got arrested when I was 15. It was a full-blown. Feds descended upon the compound in helicopters and swung through the windows with flashbangs. The whole nine. He was arrested, and since if he snitched on anyone above him he was, very bluntly, a dead man, he took the rap, was extradited to Lee and VA to serve a bit over 10 years. All he asked for while he was there was protein powder. He got prison ripped, and apparently beat someone near to death with a sock full of quarters for cutting in front of him at the payphone. At some point in my life all 4 of my uncles on both sides, plus my dad, have spent time in prison for drug-related offenses, but this particular uncle takes the cake. My dad brought in a banana tree to the US from his home village in Kerala. He literally walked through customs with a tree in a pot in his arms. The customs lady asked him what he was thinking and he just replied that the banana tree was from his mother's garden. The customs lady must have thought my dad was crazy, but she just let him walk right through. We still have that tree and its offspring. Customs lady, this is crazy. Your dad, no, this is bananas. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to smash the like button as it's greatly appreciated. More content will be coming in the near future. Sorry for not posting for a while.